You've had a very non-traditional life path and a lot of adventures. How have those adventures shaped who you are and how you think and what you believe today?
Well, all of us are shaped like stones in a river by the forces around us. And some of it's genetic, some of it may be past ancestry, um, but and many of it feels like synchronicity as well. That I happened to start a middle school, and my homeroom teacher said, "I'm starting a trampoline tumbling club this year. Anybody interested?" Or finding an old trampoline at summer camp.
Hmm.
And while the other kids were doing other options, I just loved something about jumping up and down. And so who knew that jumping up and down on a trampoline would shape the rest of my life? But that's what happened. So many of us have that sense of kismet or fates or
Hmm.
destiny, those events leading up to how our lives were shaped.
Yeah. I mean, trampoline led to gymnast, led to injury that led back to gymnastics. And then what happened after the gymnastics path? What led you to desire a more spiritual, more awakening, more to get more out of life? Like what were you not fulfilled with?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Chase, because I uh, I think it was a process of disillusion. I was always looking for authenticity. What is real? What matters? And it actually I began collecting quotations. It's been a calling or a hobby of mine for 50 years at least, even since I was a young man. Um, Pithy wisdom. I like that, and things that seem to be true. And for example, I came across one of the first quotes I came across is "A penny saved is a penny earned." Ben Franklin, you know. But then nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I came across another quote that seemed to contradict that. And then I came across, "You can't teach an old dog new tricks, but you're never too old to learn." Um, and then absence makes the heart grow fonder, but out of sight, out of mind. So I was coming across all these quotes that seemed to contradict each other while I was looking for something that was real and true. And that process of disillusion, I had early successes, but they didn't really satisfy me for long.
Hmm.
And so I wondered, where is this sense of happiness, peace, fulfillment? And that led me to a search, which took me around the world eventually, and into various aspects of personal, call it spiritual growth early on. And
Hmm.
so, because of that interest, it led me to certain experiences and trainings and mentors that ultimately shaped the rest of my life and helped me to shape the lives or influence the lives of other people.
How are you feeling about the anonymity of these pithy wisdoms now?
Well, I came across one quote, and by this time I was sort of jaded. It said, "A chain breaks at its weakest link." And in my mind, by that time, it was like, yeah, but, except there was no but. I
Mm.
couldn't find any exception to that pithy wisdom. A chain does break at its weakest link. Not only chains, that's helpful if you're in the hardware business, um, but we break at our weakest link. Everything in the known universe breaks at its weakest link.
Mhm.
And I finally came across what I call the spiritual law or universal law. Um, and that's when I started searching for these laws. Mystics and scientists both are seeking to know how the world works. They
Mhm.
just use different methods of investigation. And so that's what I did. And I was searching for what was real and true. There are, I share quotes with people. Anybody who follows me on Facebook or Instagram or Blue Sky, um, or receives my Peaceful Warrior newsletter, knows that I love sharing quotations. One example is Mark Twain, I believe it's attributed to. He said, "I've had many troubles in my life, most of which never happened." And we smile at that because there's a truth to that. Most of our troubles are projected into the future, or we interpret it as the past, but most of it doesn't happen.
Hmm.
So that's why I like these quotations. I collected them. I have like 700 pages of quotations on almost every conceivable topic that selected through my own sensibility,
Hmm.
um, that have some wisdom, wit, humor, and truth to them.
What with these quotations, other than applying them when necessary, or handing them out in newsletters, are you thinking about them? Are you reading through them? Are you trying to like use them as a guiding vessel for your life and the situations that arise?
I've never been asked that before. Maybe on some level it informs my awareness,
Hmm.
all the wisdom I've come across. But, wisdom, I mean, understanding is doing, uh, because people can understand a lot in their head,
Hmm.
but it's our lives, our behaviors, our actions more than anything else that uh, ultimately shapes our lives. If you look back on your life, I look back on mine, most anybody, any listener, viewer, looks back and they'll go, yeah, it's what I did. That's what shaped my life and brought me to this moment. Not just the feelings or the thoughts. Many people have theories that first it's a thought, then it becomes a feeling, and then that influences how we behave. But there is a form of liberation, very practical form, which is why I emphasize this approach to action, is that we have less control over what random thoughts pop into our heads, moment to moment, our discursive mind. Sometimes there's positive thoughts, sometimes they're negative thoughts, but we have less control over that. We don't have a spam filter in our heads.
Hmm.
Um, and also less control by our will over what feelings pass through us. It's like the weather patterns of the body. Sometimes we're feeling this, sometimes we're feeling that. And we can't just will ourselves to feel differently than the way we do in any given moment. We can't will ourselves to fall in love with someone we really don't like, for example. Just one example. So I suggest to people that they focus more on what they have more control over. If I were to ask you to touch the tip of your nose like I'm doing, um, you know, you intended to do it. You said, okay, I'll play along.
Hmm.
And your arm moved. And so we have more control over how we move our arms and legs and our mouth. That's a behavior, speaking, um, than we do over what thoughts pop in, or again, or what feelings pass through us. So that's why I call this approach to living, that I deem the peaceful warrior's way,
Hmm.
is focused on action. It simplifies our life radically, because we're not worried about, but if I have the right feelings, or the right thoughts, I have to think positively. I ask audiences sometimes, raise your hand if you've ever uh, uh, read a book on positive thinking. And a lot of hands go up. And I go, great. I say, now keep your hands up if you've only had positive thoughts for, say, the last week or two. All the hands go down. And I go, that's interesting, isn't it? Um, because uh, now we believe, of course, a part of us believes, if I'd read the book twice, if I'd done all the exercises in the book, if I'd highlighted it, then I would be having more positive thoughts and less negative ones. But the way we tame our mind, the way we pacify our mind, is not to try to limit it to positive thoughts. It's to uh, accept it,
Hmm.
accept our thoughts as natural to us in the moment, positive or negative, and then focus on, what do I need to do right now?
Hmm.
And that's one way that this approach to living may differ from many other New Age or psychological approaches, because there are a lot of ways to influence our feelings, our breathing, our relaxation level, um, our posture. That may influence our feelings, our emotional state. Doing NLP, Tony Robbins anchors and all those techniques. Yeah, we might, but influence means that we exert an effort in a direction, and it may or may not work.
Hmm.
You can seed clouds. to create rain, and it sometimes works and sometimes doesn't.
Yeah.
So we can try addressing that, all those ideas, and complicating our lives and manipulating our emotions and thoughts. But if we just focus on what do I need to do? And you know what? Someone can feel shy and walk up to somebody and ask them out for coffee. Someone can be angry, really irritated, and then decide to say a kind word to someone that they're irritated with. It's not easy, but it's possible. That is what I mean by a form of practical liberation.
Real quick, I just wanted to interrupt this conversation and say it is not lost on me how lucky I am each and every day to get to have these conversations. And I hope you guys, as the listeners, know how much I appreciate the time that you take out of your day to listen to these conversations. And I hope you get as much value out of listening to them as I did creating them. If I could just ask one quick favor, it helps so much for shows like mine if you like, subscribe, comment, do all those things. That helps the algorithm know and realize that there's value here and pushes it to more listeners. And by doing that, that allows me to get even bigger guests, more well-known guests, and have more conversations for you guys. I appreciate what you do so much. I appreciate the time that you take to listen to these conversations so much. I couldn't be here without you guys. Thank you. Now let's get back to the conversation. Yeah. I love it. It's so funny that you were saying if you read a book on positivity and then had negative thoughts, and then your first impetus or your first thought is like, if I had done better, if I had read it more, if I had done the practices, it would have stuck, or I would have, had a better result. And the majority of my life, it's always been I've read a book, and then it's like, okay, I didn't get everything I needed. The next one will be the one that moves me over. The next one, the next podcast, the next practice, the next daily habit will be the thing that moves me over. And what I really haven't realized until about 6 months ago, I actually read Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art, and to take quotes, he quotes Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, we're entitled to our labor, not the fruits of our labor. And that kind of clicked for me. It was like, not everything, I'm never going to have everything figured out. I can continue to learn and progress, but that doesn't mean that I'm suddenly going to be enlightened. So I need to do things that I am content with not having the results that I may want. Like, I can't control whether this podcast is going to be the biggest podcast in the world, but I can control who I talk to, and I can control what I get out of it and how much joy it brings me. And
Exactly.
that has been the biggest change for me, is just I'm entitled to my labor, not the fruits of my labor. So let me make sure my labor is important.
Yes, that's great. Yeah, not being attached to the outcomes is very, very valuable. Um, Actions are their own reward in a
Mm.
way. By
Hmm.
acting, we live a constructive, productive life.
Yeah. Yeah. Why
Yeah.
is it, do you think, that we're innately so biased toward outcome?
Well, of course, as with a background as a past athlete
Hmm.
uh, and coach, I did like positive outcomes. But
Hmm.
there was a point where I retired from coaching because I didn't care who won anymore. I appreciated all the athletes, my team, their team, in terms of their efforts and their achievements. Um, so, to me, success, uh, I would define success as making regular progress toward a meaningful goal for us. Because if we're going up a mountain path and our goal is to reach the top of the mountain, we fail by definition every day. We don't reach the top. But if we define success as every step in the right direction, then we have one success after another. So that's to me a more realistic and useful definition of success than just reaching that one place. You know, in the Peaceful Warrior movie, for example, there's that scene in which Dan and Socrates hike up this big hill, and at the top, Dan has a revelation. The character, he says, "Soc, I realize it's not the destination that makes us happy; it's the journey." Well, there is some truth to that, because most of our lives are spent on the journey. But without a destination in mind, there is no journey. We just wander around. So we're hardwired goal seekers. I watch my grandkids they live near us when they were little crawling across the floor. I remember Eleanor was crawling on the floor, and she wasn't crawling to get a workout.
Hmm.
She was crawling because she wanted something. She wanted her brother's sparkly toy or whatever it was. So even very young, we're hardwired, we're seeking goals. And I think those of us who are most content and absorbed in our lives, call it in the flow, in the zone, are moving towards something.
Hmm.
From our point A, we need a point B. And I think when we reach point B, we choose another point, a point C. And that's what helps us to move through life. What is my purpose? Uh, and then doing what needs to be done in line with that purpose. It really does simplify life. If we
Yeah.
join a group of people and we say, "Hey, how are you all doing?" Um, we had a reason for doing that. Either we want to give information, get information, or form a camaraderie with them. But there's a reason we do things. And in fact, one of my books, a little book, has a lot in it. It's called "The Four Purposes of Life."
Hmm.
It addresses uh, four different kinds of purposes. And people say, well, wait a minute. A friend of mine said, Dan, I know the purpose of life. I don't need to read your book. The purpose is to love. Whatever the question, love is the answer. And I said, well, that's a good purpose. And another friend said, yeah, but what about enlightenment? And that's a primary human goal, isn't it, on the spiritual quest? And I went, yep, that's a great goal too. But just as we divide the directions on the compass, the points on the compass, into four primary directions, and the days of the year into months, um, by looking at our lives through the filter of these four purposes, it helps us to find a bit of clarity rather than in the chaos of experience.
Hmm. Hmm. I definitely want to talk about that book as well, but I want to start with your first book as well. The Way of the
Sure.
Peaceful Warrior. That's where this all started.
Sure.
What would be the elevator pitch to somebody hoping to get something out of your book? What can they be expected to get? And then why did you name it The Way of the Peaceful Warrior?
Mm. I came up with that term while I was teaching a martial arts course at Oberlin College in Ohio. I was an assistant professor there, and it was Aikido and Tai Chi. We did 10 weeks in Aikido, 10 weeks in Tai Chi, and um, naturally for the catalog, I was going to call it the way of the warrior, the path of the warrior. But then I said, wait a minute, but these arts are not aggressive. They're more receptive arts. They're internal arts. So I said, in a light bulb moment, I went, why don't I call it the way of the peaceful warrior? So that's when I first coined the term. And it was years later when I wrote the book, I didn't know what to call it. It was holistic. It was all I'd wanted to share with people. I'd read Castaneda, and about the Nagual and taking peyote and mescaline and all that stuff. And, but I wanted to show people could learn. They didn't have to take necessarily psychedelics, or they could learn wisdom from almost anyone, and even an old service station attendant. And I had met this old fellow in a gas station after a late night date. So he inspired the character of Socrates, who I called Socrates for those not familiar with my work, played by Nick Nolte in the movie version. Um, so um, that's when that idea came up. Why don't I call it the way of the peaceful warrior? And I didn't really have any in depth into the meaning of that term until years later. It deepened. For example, now I define it as we're all peaceful warriors in training in the school of everyday life, because we all are seeking to live with a more peaceful heart, a sense of serenity, equanimity um, in the midst of the whirlwind of life around us. But at the same time, we acknowledge there are times we need a warrior's spirit. It's not about fighting necessarily, except with the inner demons of self-doubt, insecurity, and so on. But it's more about rolling up our sleeves and marching into life and taking it on day by day. Um, I see daily life as a form of spiritual weight training. If we don't lift any weights, we don't get any stronger.
Hmm.
I was already at the Y this morning doing some weight training, so uh,
Nice, nice. Um, wh- Is there a point where you can look back in your life and kind of pinpoint when you were able to achieve a peaceful heart and a peaceful life?
Well, sometimes, somebody once asked me, they said, "Dan, you seem like a nice guy." I said, "Sometimes."
Yeah.
Because we're sometimes this, sometimes that. Life is
Mhm.
a series of moments. So I would say that I've achieved a peaceful heart in moments.
Mm.
And sometimes it's not as peaceful. So what we can each do, it's a more realistic goal than having this enlightened disposition always
Mhm.
stably. Um, so sometimes it's increasing those moments where we have a peaceful heart, increasing those moments where we have a warrior spirit. And, there are moments where I've been quite intelligent, and there are also moments I've been pretty stupid. Ask my daughters. Um, and so there are kind moments and callous moments. So we need to be gentle with ourselves and not have expectations. We're going to read a particular book, even though a lot of people have been encouraged by Way of the Peaceful Warrior. It's been published over time in 29 languages. So somebody must have liked it. And
Mhm.
it's still going strong today. It's
Yeah.
weird, a 1980 book, but people seem to hand it down through families and so on. So, but even Peaceful Warrior, people say, I think at best, people wrote to me and said, "This book changed my life. This book changed my life." And I wanted to say, well, what do you mean by that? And I believe it means it helped expand their perspective about life's promise and possibilities.
Mhm.
And that's the best I can say. So,
There's this
yeah.
there's, a book called, I can't remember who wrote it, but it's called Chop Wood, Carry Water. Simple book.
Mhm.
You can read it in a sitting or 2. It's
It may
about
be
a
Jack Cornfield. Jack Cornfield is a
I think that's
Zen
right.
teacher in
Yeah.
California. Lovely
Very,
book.
very simple book, very great book, very easy to digest, but the basic premise is, this kid wants to be, a Japanese samurai archer, and he goes to Japan, and starts training. And most of that time is spent chopping wood, carry water, which is quote unquote the basics, doing the simple stuff and not getting overly detailed on the next level things. And whenever you do get awry or whenever things do feel overwhelming, you go back to the basics: chop wood, carry water. What are some of the basics that people should implement in their life to gain more peaceful moments?
Well, interesting you mentioned that. By the way, in Way of the Peaceful Warrior, I also have that anecdote about somebody finds this personage coming
Hmm.
up the path. He has a heavy bag on his back, and he says, "You must be enlightened." And he said, "I just sense a wisdom from you." And he said, "So what is enlightenment?" And he takes the heavy sack, puts it on the ground, and stands up straight. And he says, "But what is after enlightenment?" And he picks up the sack, puts it over his shoulder, and continues on his way. Same idea. And Jack Cornfield picked up a lot of that wisdom in his Zen training. Um, he wrote another book called A Path with Heart, which is also a book I recommend to people. Um, so, well, enlightened moments. That's the key. Just what we were talking about before. Uh, to increase those numbers. Now, people go, but yeah, but what is that? And I go, oh, well, let's find out if you understand enlightenment. Um, is an enlightened being relaxed or tense? Oh, well, they'd be relaxed. Okay. Um, and are they kind or cruel? Probably more kind. Hmm. And you can go on and on with a list of questions. So we all kind of sense what that's like. So this approach I teach is behave more and more like an enlightened being.
So just
Fake it
having,
till you make it.
yeah. So just
And
having that
eventually,
awareness
yeah,
to check in every day.
exactly.
Yeah.
Eventually, we bring that into life, a more enlightened disposition in living,
Hmm.
rather than waiting for that cosmic ore to smack us over the head. And
Hmm.
then everything is easy after that. Well, I don't know, not in human life. Um, but there is something I will share with you to respond to that question, Chase, which is um, after I gave a talk at a college, a young man came up to me and said, "Dan, um, I really liked your talk. And I understand you do personal consultations. He said, but I'm a poor college student. So what can you tell me for $1? Because you must charge a lot of money for your consultations. And he gave me his dollar. And I told him 6 words that could change his life. It was a lifetime practice. So we can begin with that. Those 6 words were here and now, breathe and relax. And many of us understand. I mean, we've read in many different sources, it's good to live in the present moment, blah, blah, blah. But often we don't really understand what that means. Um, People ask me, they write to me and say, Dan, how do I live in the present moment? Well, first of all, it's a paradoxical question because the body can't live anywhere but the present moment. It's the mind that flits. Our attention goes from what we call the future, which is really our imagination, or also it goes to the past. Oh, I wish I hadn't done that, or gee, if I had changed that. That's memory.
Hmm.
So we mistake. Now, these are good qualities. The ability to remember and learn from our past and to imagine the future. Those are all useful things. Planning our day, for example. But the day rarely turns out to be the way we'd imagined it. Still, um, but we don't want to mistake those for the reality of this moment,
Hmm.
right now. Now, of course, any physicist will tell you there's no such thing as a present moment because um, if I say the word, if I try to capture the present and go, now, well, by the time I said, from the time I said to ow, now, a million nanoseconds passed. Which nanosecond was the present? So, what teachers like myself are really saying, and like Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now, blah, 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 um, are saying, handle what's in front of you. Because that's our moment of power. That's our moment of reality. And if
Hmm.
people go, well, I have a busy mind, I go, oh, well, you want to quiet your mind? Okay. Um, and I toss them some keys. And they reach to grab the keys. And in that moment, they're not thinking about yesterday or tomorrow. They're thinking, they're like a cat like awareness in that moment. And so that's why people like to play frisbee and sports and play musical instruments because it brings us back to the present.
Hmm.
So that's the here and now part. The breathe and relax part is the antidote to stress. Stress is a part of life. I mean, I can tell people, I can give them a pithy quote in terms of how to never feel stressed at all in your life, which is don't care about anything or
Yeah.
anyone. But that's not realistic advice because we do care.
Hmm.
So stress is part of our life. Different people are stressed in different situations. Some athletes feel very comfortable doing a sport, but not so much at a party,
Hmm.
a social situation. Others, it's just the opposite. So we feel stress in different ways, but it's not the stress that harms us, our neuroimmunology, whatever. It's the tension that goes along with stress. It's the lack of breathing, inhibited breathing. So by remembering, and this is totally under our control, by remembering to take a nice deep breath, I'll do it right now, and to relax the body. So even in the most stressful situation, can you imagine me sitting here going, wow, I'm going through such a stressful time, but I'm relaxed and I'm breathing. So that's a different critter. That's a different experience than tension and inhibited breathing in stress.
Hmm.
So here and now, breathe and relax. If someone takes away nothing from this podcast, but that could be a lifetime practice.
If they take nothing away from that, it's a lifetime practice. I understand the, breathe and relax. We breathe in, we relax, we go through our body, we relax our toes, relax our tension, kind of be in this moment. And then the here and now part is definitely, like you said, that's the difficult one because it's not as practical. Like we said, we don't have that spam filter in our brain. We can't control our thoughts. If we're an anxious person or if we have something coming up that we are scared for, our brain is going to be wandering and wandering. We have to constantly be pulling that back. Are there any practices that you like to use or implement, like meditation or anything like that, to improve our ability to do that?
Well, let's address the issue of meditation. Um, Meditation is not so much how to quiet the mind, but how to quiet the body. Once the body is quiet and serene and the breath has come to rest, then the mind tends to follow suit. The mind tends to impose tension on the body. So it's a different view of meditation than sitting down and trying with our brows knitted to quiet the mind because it only gets noisier.
Hmm.
Um, Mental noise is quite natural. Um, it's a way of bubbling off um, issues of the day, like dreams. So when we sit to meditate, any meditator will tell you, yes, we have emotional feelings pass through us, mental ideas, images, and thoughts. Um, but the nature of meditation, and it takes some gifted people 5 minutes of meditation, and that's it. They've done it. Other people will meditate 50 years over a 50-year period to finally get the message that to see the illusory nature of thought. Thoughts are not a problem. Believing the thoughts, mistaking them for reality. You have an angry thought, you get angry, you get upset, and so on. So it helps us form a distance from our thoughts. That's the use of meditation. And, there was a coach from USC when I was coaching at Stanford University. He came up because I developed a reputation as sort of an oddball. And this is before yoga exploded, it blew up. And before meditation became a popular thing. Only outliers and weirdos and hippies did those kinds of things back then. So the coach whispered to me, while the team was about to start competing, he said, "Dan, I heard rumors that you have your team meditate before competitions." And I went, "Oh, no, no, Jack." I said, "I wouldn't do that. I have them meditate during competitions." Because gymnastics is a profound form of meditation. It's a
Hmm.
warrior meditation because it's meditate or die. Pay attention or
Hmm.
die. So, yes, there are abilities you develop over time, concentration powers. Um, um, so you have one-pointed concentration, as the Zen Buddhists say. Um, but anyone can sit and look. My daughters, when they were going to high school, there was a Zen Roshi named Reb Anderson who gave a talk at their school, and I went to attend it. A small group of people. It was extracurricular. Um, and afterward, I asked Reb, um, Roshi Anderson, can you give me a couple of tips for meditating well? And he said, yes. First, you must have a good posture, not leaning forward into the future or leaning backward into the past, but sitting stably, vertically in this moment. I went, thank you. And he said, and then the second tip I would advise is that you must die. Now, obviously, he wasn't talking about physical
Yeah.
death,
Ego death.
but but I thought about that
Yeah.
deeply afterward. What did he mean by that? And of course, it was die to attachment because most people sit down and meditate and just daydream and think, oh, that's right, I've got to go to the dry cleaner today, and so on and so forth. And it affects the quality of their meditation. So, what that developed into, that contemplation developed into a 4 minute meditation. I call it the Peaceful Warrior 4 minute meditation that I created, and it's available online at my website and so on and so forth. Um, but this meditation is on the process of dying. Now, many of us have beliefs about what happens after death. If you're Buddhist, maybe reincarnation or a Hindu. And if you're a more Christian, then it's heavenly realms and so on. And um, different people have beliefs, but no one knows for certain, even though many people have their beliefs. But we do know that the body decomposes, that we lose certain things. And this 4-minute meditation takes us through the process of dying. Why? Why would, how many people hear, oh, a death meditation? I'm so there, no, it's not initially appealing to people. However, um, I've found no better method than just 4 minutes a day. And I do it every day. I have since probably oh gosh, 15 years I've been doing
Mm.
it. Um, it helps release the fear of death. Now, I'm not saying we go through the exact same order of processes, letting go, but it's a willingness to let go. And that helps us to truly live. I found no better way to help us appreciate our lives and our senses and all we have in life, because we tend to take it for granted. I ask people sometimes, if you woke up tomorrow and discovered you could fly, you could soar like Peter Pan, Superman, Superwoman. You could just take off and fly. What do you think you'd feel? And I get things like ecstatic, liberated, happy, expansive, free, and so on. And then I say, but what do you think you'd feel a month later or 2 months later? Wouldn't you end up taking it for granted, um, just like you do the ability to see or hear or move, to influence other people? So this helps us not take life for granted and reminds us. So not only does it help clear the fear of death, which I really, my aspiration on dying is to become really good compost. Uh, that's my view. Um, but to the young people like you, you're at a young age. It's just death is a distant rumor. But someone like myself, it's I have more to look back on than forward to. But this meditation has really helped clear any fear of death and also helped me appreciate every day. I have a
Mm.
new day to
Yeah.
live.
It sounds like there'd be a lot of benefit to starting that practice early. Give you more appreciation of each day versus,
Exactly.
and I'd rather experience that sooner than later.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are the four purposes of life?
Well, the first purpose is learning life's lessons. Oh, that sounds so mundane. We all know we learn from our life experience, but it turns out that there are 12 courses in the School of Life, and I summarize those in that first chapter. Um, uh, Courses in the School of Life. Um, you see, what it really states is we are guaranteed to learn everything we need to evolve as a human being. Daily life will teach us that. Um, so it recognizes the earth as a divine school and daily life as our classroom. And so it helps us to understand the purpose of daily life, the purpose of the challenges we note. And the school rules, the school has rules. We call them spiritual laws. So obviously that's just a brief summary, like an AI summary, of the first chapter, but learning life's lessons. We're here to learn. School for souls, let's say.
Do you
The second,
think
yeah,
do you think that purpose one, learning life's lessons, is as true today as it was maybe 30 years ago? Like the reality of life is different now than it was then, and different then than it was, 100 years back. Do you still think it applies and it will apply into the future?
yes. I think it's applied. It applies since human beings were on the planet,
Mm.
and it will apply indefinitely into the future. Um, we'll still learn, even with AI and all the
Hmm.
radical changes that will bring. Life will still have its challenges, and we still do the spiritual weightlifting, and we will continue to learn. Yeah.
Friends, I'm jumping in real quick to tell you about today's sponsor, Nordic Wave. Nordic Wave makes premium cold plunges. We've talked a lot about heat exposure on the fact that I have a sauna, but on the other spectrum is cold exposure, and just as important, Nordic Wave makes premium cold plunges that get all the way down to 37 degrees Fahrenheit or heat up all the way to 104. That way you can get the hot and cold. These run 24/7 to keep the water clean with filtration and ozone injection. Now, I've been using mine each and every day, not only for the physical benefits. Yes, I recover better. Yes, I sleep good. Yes, I feel more energized. I've earned my dopamine, but for the psychological and mental benefits as well. It is hard to do something hard. But the fact is, when you do something hard, it becomes easier to do those hard things in the future, and you can accomplish even more difficult things than you ever thought possible. So head to Nordic Wave, use code Merrill at checkout. That's MERRILL to save you some money and start doing some hard things. All right, let's get back to the episode. Great. Purpose 2.
All right, purpose 2. That's finding our career and calling. And I differentiate the two. Um, our career is how we make money. And some people may say, well, wait a minute, Dan. Not only do I make money at my job, but I like the people I work with. I find it meaningful, and that's great. That's all great. But if you weren't making any money doing it, you probably have to find something else. Because commerce, the ability to use our intelligence, our ability, our energy to make an income, since the barter days, in primitive times, someone made good arrowheads and someone else was a good listener, and they
Mm-hmm.
traded those things. So um, producing an income is about the core of making a life, making a living. But a calling won't necessarily make money. It may, if we are skillful at it. Um, but our calling, whether you would call it a hobby or a mission, it's something we find meaningful individually, and different people like different aspects of life. So, like playing guitar, for example, um, it's important to differentiate the two because this young guitarist says, "I don't want to sell out. I want to continue with my guitar, so someday I can be a Segovia or a master guitarist." And meanwhile, they're living in their parents' basement, and maybe if they had a day job, they could earn some independence and get out of their parents' basement and practice in their spare time the guitar. And in the other way, there are people who don't value anything that doesn't make money, and they've abandoned a calling, a hobby, something that gives them a lot of joy and meaning because it didn't make money.
Mm-hmm.
So there are people like myself whose career and calling are one and the same. Now, how do you know if your career and calling are one and the same? Easy. If you won the lottery, would you keep doing it? I
Mm-hmm.
would still be on podcasts like this. I would still be teaching because I find meaning and joy in doing so,
Mm.
obviously, right?
Yeah.
So that's finding one's career and calling.
I mean, I want to dive into that because calling sounds, it adds a lot of pressure. I'm 29, and I've always sat down and since I was 6, I was like, okay, I gotta find my calling. I gotta find my calling. And it's like, oh, I thought it was this. I thought it was this, and it adds. What do you say to people who haven't found it yet and are just like, how do they start? Where do they how do they strive and discover that? Because it's so everybody wants to find their calling, right? They want to find the thing that gives them that joy, that gives them that purpose, but maybe they haven't found it yet and they feel the pressure of not having found it.
Yeah. Well, that's a very good question. It's meaningful as well. Um, Many people are dissatisfied because they haven't found the perfect,
Mm,
like a soulmate, soul job. How do I best, the most meaningful and possible joyous way to spend my time? Here's the thing: I believe that peaceful warriors, and that's all of us, can make good money doing what we enjoy or at least find fulfilling, satisfying, appropriate, um, while serving other people. All three of those are important. Good money, meaningful work while serving other people, providing a
Mhm.
service, connecting with people. Like I know a multimillionaire who works in a bookstore because she finds she loves books
Mhm.
and she doesn't really need the money, but it's a way to connect with people. Um, and life is an experiment. I often, one central tenet of the Peaceful Warrior's Way is that there's no best book, no best teacher, no best philosophy or religion or system of exercise or diet. There's only the best for each of us at a given time of our life. And that can change over time. Life is an experiment. So it's like the kiss a lot of frogs, principle
Yeah.
before you find your prince or princess. Um, so 29, you're just coming into your own. You're on the build, and
Mhm.
I'm semi-retired at this point. So, um, looking for the again, it's not about the perfect job. It's a job we find appropriate, functional, and maybe something else will pop up. You never
Mhm.
know how
Mhm.
that goes. I mean, I was a gymnastics coach. I was a gymnast and a coach. And how did I start writing? Well, just I had that inside of me. And the book failed. I mean, the book came out. I spent 7 years doing draft after draft. And when it came out, my editor thought it would be a clever idea to say, why don't we call Way of the Peaceful Warrior, subtitle it a basically true story. Well, this is before the internet. Bookstores wanted to know where to shelve it. Is it
Mhm.
fiction or nonfiction? Can't be both, which it is. It's a mixture of both. So most bookstores didn't want it, and the book failed. It died. And 3 years later, this old fellow, a retired publisher, um, who is probably 10 years younger than I am now, but he came, Hal Kramer said, I'd like to publish your book, Dan. And I said, well, how much are you going to give me for advance on royalties? And he said, how about $100? And I went, that doesn't seem like very much. How many people are in your company? He said, just me right now. And I said, well, how much money are you going to spend on promoting the book? And he said, not much. I'm just going to write some letters to bookstores, let them know back in business with your book. And I reached out and said, you've got a deal, because no one had been interested in republishing it. And
Mhm.
then the word of mouth started. So the point is, we rise to great heights, according to Francis Bacon, by a winding staircase.
Mm. Mhm.
So right now, you're a great podcast host, and down the line, that may expand into something else. It'll appear at appropriate times. The analogy I use, when I lived in Marin County, California, um, driving from San Francisco, you go over the Golden Gate Bridge, then you go up over a big hill and you see Sausalito.
Mm.
Many people have heard of Sausalito. Then you go down into a valley, and then you see Mill Valley, and then you go up over a hill and you see Larkspur Landing and Corte Madera, and you go down the hill. Then you go up another hill, you see San Rafael, where I used to live, um, before we moved to New York. So the point is, until you get to the top of that hill, you can't see what's on the other side. And
Mhm.
there are moments in our lives where suddenly, wow, this is what I'm going to be doing. But it's not looking for the perfect job. People go, wow, you must love traveling, Dan. I go, what part? You mean finding an overhead compartment for my luggage? I mean, on the plane. I love the teaching. But so there are aspects of any job that aren't perfect.
Mhm. Mhm.
But um, we do this until we discover something else
Yeah.
naturally appearing. But
I think
again, career is making money, functional work, calling is, and you can ask yourself, what were your hobbies? What were you interested in? A guy named Ron Kaufman, all he loved to do was throw frisbees. And Ron and I are still in touch. I met him 50 years ago. And Ron ended up, he called the Whammo company and said, I'd like you to print in Russian and English, world peace on the frisbees. And I'm going to become a frisbee goodwill ambassador. I'd like you to send me. It'll be great promotion, cheap for you, and I'll be a frisbee goodwill ambassador. And he went to Russia numerous times, married a Russian wife, and taught and did frisbees in Red Square and so on. So the point is, Ron turned his calling into a career.
Mhm.
And that's not always true. I mean, I used to tell my daughters, do what you love and get someone to pay you for it. Um, but self knowledge takes time, at least 10 years after college.
Hmm.
Um, and by self knowledge, I'm talking about what are my talents? What am I good at and not good at? What are my values? What are my interests?
Hmm.
Because often we confuse interests with what someone else or we think we should do rather than because I wanted to be, I was going to school to become an attorney, but I found out in my first law course that probably wasn't my direction. So it wasn't appropriate to my talents, interests, and values. So this self knowledge brings us to the third purpose in that little book, which is a more mysterious purpose. It's our life path.
Mm.
And I wrote my most popular book, along with Way of the Peaceful Warrior, is a book called The Life You Were Born to Live. But that would be in fact, I'm teaching a whole weekend workshop in that arena um, at a place called Omega Institute in New York um, in June. Uh, on that topic, finding your life path and purpose. So it goes into a lot of, it's uncannily accurate. It's a system, a life purpose system that helps people clarify their life path, the core issues of their lives, which they've been stumbling over in the dark, largely. And that brings me to the fourth purpose, which is the most important one of all, which is our purpose in this moment. Because we may not know our cosmic purpose yet, ultimately, but we do know our purpose right now, right? You know
Hmm.
your purpose in this moment. I know my purpose. So in the moment, our purpose is always clear.
Mm. I think that's the fourth one definitely provides the most relieving feeling for people who don't have the second one figured out. It's like, okay, if I don't have the
Exactly.
second one figured out, I do have the fourth one figured out, and that will probably lead me to my
Ex-
career, my calling.
Stepping stones, moments, moment by moment. Yep.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, I mean, when I discovered and decided to finally start doing this podcast around episode 10, I think I finally realized that this was at least my calling for this time. If I were to win the lottery, I would still be doing my podcast, just bigger and better. I'd be flying all over the world and doing it in person, but I'd still be doing this. I think what throws a lot of people off, and definitely me initially, is we think of this calling as, once we discover it, always easy. It's always going to be easy. Like, we're always going to want to do it, versus that's not true. At least not what I've discovered with this podcast. There are times when I don't want to sit down and do the guest brief, or when I'm nervous to talk to the guest or do these things. That's still work. It's still hard, but I
Sure.
am a lot happier when I do it. And I think
Yeah.
for me, realizing that, yes, it's my calling, but that doesn't mean it's always easy. That's when things kind of clicked.
Exactly. There's a new age belief that once you find your path, it'll just be clear sailing from then on,
Exactly.
magically. But no, trees can fall in your path,
Hmm.
and those trees are a perfect part of the process. You get stronger going over them, and yeah, I didn't feel like going into the gym every day when I was a gymnast in
Hmm.
training, but we do it, doing what needs to be done, and that's really the key.
Amazing. Well, Dan, I know we're reaching the end of our time, so I've got two closing questions that I like to ask all my guests. The first is, who do you think I should speak to next, and why? And then the second is based off of a Ralph Waldo Emerson quote: "If we counter a man of rare intellect, we should ask him what books he reads." What's a book you'd recommend for me?
Well, the last part of the question, the last part, a book I'd recommend, I wouldn't,
No.
and that's because there's no best book, only the best for you at a given time. And even saying what I'm reading now, I mean, I'm reading a book my daughter recommended called The Last Unicorn. It's a very creative fiction story. Um, it's not in the personal growth arena necessarily, it's just a fantasy,
Hmm.
but it's quite engaging. So the point is, am I recommending it to you? No, it may not be your cup of tea at all. So um, I, I I like to listen to audiobooks while I'm walking around the park or whatever. Um, I enjoy audiobooks, and then I read on my Kindle and I
Hmm.
read print books as well. Um, so Yeah, I can't really recommend a book to anybody. Um, they can go to my website if they want to look over my books and see if any of them sing to them or call to them, you know.
Hmm.
Um, uh, but the first question you asked was,
Who do you think I should speak to next and why?
yeah, yeah, sure. Well, you know, who came to mind, who just popped into my mind was a fellow named David Myers. David is a 10-time world Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champion, but he's also founder of Adopt-A-Pet. He animal rights. He totally plant-based diet. So he's a champion athlete who eats a plant-based diet. Just a bright, very, very bright guy. And off air, I can give you his contact information. Just drop me a note and I'll send you Dave's. So he's quite an interesting person in terms of the variety of
Yeah.
things in which he's engaged.
Sounds like it. I'd love to talk with him. Well, Dan, again, thank you so much for your time today. Where can people follow you? Where can they get more? Where can they get your books?
Well, I guess the one stop is peacefulwarrior.com. And there are a lot of services there. They can look at the life purpose calculator and get a little taste of their life path.
Yeah,
It's free
I
and
looked at that. I'm sad we didn't get a touch on that, so we're gonna have to run this back in a couple months so we can go down a totally different area
a
because
whole area,
that'll
right?
be a great conversation.
Yeah. Um, and yeah, or they can, if they like quotations from my sensibility, they can follow me on Facebook or Instagram or Blue Sky, and which I like a lot. Um, that's one way of staying in touch. And they can subscribe to my newsletter, which I only send it out once a month, the occasional announcement, but normally, and I just share some thoughts on different topics. They can access the archives. We have so much to write about and think about and read about anyway. It's almost overwhelming, but I keep it short and sweet, like me.
Awesome,
And
Dan. Well,
by the way, I really appreciate the preparation you did before. It's obvious. Um, Not all hosts do that, so I really want to thank you for that.
well, thank you. I appreciate your time being here and to make it's the least I can do. I have so much respect for the guests that I have on that you have to prepare as much as you can and for my listeners as well. Like I don't want to waste their time or your time. So I really appreciate you saying that.
Sure. You brought out the best in me, and I want to thank you, and it's been a pleasure making your acquaintance.
Thank you. Likewise.